Yeah, I know. I know. Everything that happens here from here on out is on the internet forever, including this sentence.
All right, I'm
Anyway,
gonna log off.
yeah, I'll see y'all later. Uh, Zoe, would you like to kick it off?
I guess. Welcome everybody to our Dialogues at Dusk. Today we are talking about breaking boundaries with Chris of Junk Food Games, publisher of small, very cool games, also some larger ones, things that mix the boundaries between board game and TTRPG. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome.
Zoe, we didn't
Um,
send Chris
I
that question. We didn't pre-write the "How are you doing" question, so I feel like we just put Chris on the spot there. Sorry, Chris.
yeah, well.
You didn't have time to think about how you were doing the day, so that's on us. Well, I just wanted to. Sorry.
Yeah, we gotta throw a lot of curveballs. We
Yeah.
don't want our guests to get too comfortable.
True.
Um, yeah, I it's pretty rare that I encounter a designer who like kind of mixes and matches like these kind of elements that you see traditionally in board games. Um, like lots of card play mechanics, blackjack kind of stuff, like navigating like a maze type stuff, and combining that with like these like role playing elements, where you're need to like journal your feelings or respond to prompts and things like that. So like I had the first thing I'd like to ask is how do you find these elements like complement each other as somebody who designs a lot in this kind of space?
Um, so I I think that it's just the TTRPG elements and the board game elements are and kind of the combination or like kind of the blurring of the lines there is I don't think it's something I do always intentionally. I think it when I started designing things, it was almost exclusively in board games, and later on, I started shifting over to TTRPGs, and it just anytime I tried to make something that was like very purely in the TTRPG space, I accidentally got a little bit of board game on it. Um, and I don't know, I most of the things that I make, I really make them for like myself as an audience. I know you're ideally supposed to think of like who the target audience is when you make things, but I really try to make things that I want just to play myself, and um, just so happens that a lot of them have like a little bit of board games and a little bit of TTRPG in it, and um, I don't know. I think a lot of TTRPGs already have um, and where the influence of board games and vice versa, with board games having the influence of TTRPGs on them.
Hmm.
Um, and I think um, uh, there's probably a lot more crossover that exists inherently in designs in both worlds that may not be discussed very often.
Yeah, it it really does feel like that. I was going to say it doesn't really seem like it's like a intentional thing for you. It seems like a natural like inclination for you to design in this way. Um, but like it seems like for whatever reason the TTRPG space and the board game space feels like awfully divided sometimes. Like it feels like they have trouble taking chairs seriously, like TTRPG. Like I remember seeing a conversation on Blue Sky where TTRPG designers were talking about how like it's hard to take board games seriously because they're all about like competition and whatnot. And I mean to an extent I kind of agree with that. And then there's like board game people who have trouble taking like TTRPG seriously because it's like oh it's so fuzzy and messy and like they want concrete rules and deterministic stuff and so um but they do really seem like there's nothing in the getting in the way of stopping those things from like combining into something where you have like these events that where you have like a narrative opportunity to have the player inject some like their own like narrative like where the influence onto like what's happening in the game, the journaling elements. I think that's great. Um,
I,
yeah.
I don't want to speak on
Uh,
behalf of Chris, but I was kind of thinking about this because, like, Chris, you have a very unique, background in this and that. To me, like, it's almost like if you've ever watched a musician, they transition from one instrument to another, and they take a lot of those lessons from that instrument, and then they bring them into this other space. And all the people that have been doing that instrument for years are like, "Whoa, what the heck? Like, what are you doing over there?" That kind of thing. And so, like, I've always been a fan of your games and your journey because to me, it's almost like taking all these like taking one language, learning another, and then applying all the stuff that you learned from that previous foundation. I think a lot of folks when they get into board gaming or TTRPGs or any of that stuff, it's not like there's traditional schools of knowledge for any of this. So a lot of people start with the most common subset of knowledge, and that's their foundation for making a thing. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but your journey was probably a little bit different. You kind of came into it maybe in a different way than most traditional TTRPG designers come into it, possibly.
Maybe, yeah. And I don't. I'm certainly not the only one who makes games like this. And there's a lot of designers out there that have kind of cross between role playing elements and board game elements. Like one designer I follow, um, like the games that he makes are very clearly kind of like in an RPG space, but like have a lot of board game influence. And he said on multiple occasions, like, "Oh, I don't even like TTRPGs." And it's like when I found that out, it kind of blew my mind. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" and and yeah, I also when I started with kind of designing RPGs and discovering a lot like the kind of niche things. Um, you know, I was coming into it like at a certain point in time where I didn't have a lot of the background and history on like the indie scene that I had been a little closer to in board games and a little bit more in touch with. And so I was probably, you know, trying to make things and skipping a lot of like the, um, maybe I don't know what you call it, like a gatekeepy kind of things like rites of passage or whatever. But
Mm. Just
so yeah,
barreled
I
on
barely
through.
think, yeah, and so like I said before, like I don't even always like calling the stuff that I make TTRPGs, even though I do call them that. Kind of like board games, like that word it encompasses so many things, and same in board games. People have certain definitions of what that stuff means. Sometimes it's very rigid, sometimes it's very broad, and so yeah, I don't know. I think it's to me it's both all analog games are like the definition is wide open, and um, I don't think um, everything always fits neatly in one group or another.
nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that you when you started out you were not as familiar with like the indie scene for like the TTRPG side, so you kind of had like more of a start on like the board game side. Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
Yeah, yeah. I had been more, I guess, aware and in touch with um, board games, the hobby, the indie part of board games, and then I had been somewhat aware with TTRPGs as well, but not until I had maybe like shortly before I started like trying to design them, had I been aware of like um, everything that was going on like itch.io and
Mm.
other things like kind of in that realm. And when I had seen that and kind of the um, I don't know, the experimentation with microgames and just the breadth of what people were calling TTRPGs. It was something I had no real idea about because I had my own preconceived notions about what is a TTRPG and all that stuff.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it seemed like everything was like it's like a huge. It was much bigger than I had thought.
You have a lot of these micro games. Like, I think your itch has like the most the of your catalog, right? I know
Yeah.
you have some stuff on the Game Crafter too, but like, itch is where I like find like most of your stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And like it seems like a lot of these are like born from like game jams and things like that. Is How would like are game jams like a big part of your process, like a big source of inspiration? Like how do game jams factor into your like process?
Yeah. I think um, yeah. Not always intentionally. Like I don't seek out game jams, but yeah, I've definitely a lot of the games I've made are born from game jams. I find the constraints very inspiring.
Mm.
Um, some more so than others, but yeah, the very first like one page TTRPG I made was from a game jam. Um, that Beth and Angel make games they had hosted
Mm-hmm.
a while ago, and their games also were like extremely inspirational for me at that time. Like that was like those were some of the first games I had seen that were like really, you know, really opened my eyes to like that kind of game making, and I that the jam that they hosted, um, I think it was in 2022. I was immediately just like went from nah, I don't think I can make things like that to like oh wow, I'm gonna do this right now. And um, yeah, I don't know. It was just I had done at around that time as well a few more jams, kind of in the same kind of micro game type space, and then over the years I've done some other ones that have kind of snowballed a little bit into bigger games or bigger ideas. Um, some of them would be like the Break My Game jams, and but other just jams that people in the RPG space have hosted over time.
I'm curious. What are some of the ones that snowballed into a bigger game? Because yeah, I'm curious.
Moon Rings was one that started as a very small idea, and part of I'm gonna butcher the name of the jam, but it's a very good name that the jam had. I think it was called "Fuck Up the Moon," um,
Whoa.
and I yeah, the designer hosted it. Justin Vandermeer is a huge inspiration games that he makes, and um, yeah, I found the jam topic very inspiring. And it was the prompt was very the title is pretty much what the prompt of the jam was, and I said the idea that I had was started out very small, and then it kind of grew as I was playtesting it, and um, yeah, I think it might be the longest game I have now. And it was not. I definitely didn't start. I didn't start out to make it that way.
Oops, that's
That was very cool.
yeah, that's a classic design thing of starting small and then
Yeah.
it oopsies into your large game. I've been there.
I aesthetically really like this one. I like the concept of you collecting these moon rings onto your fingers, but also potentially losing your fingers. And I don't know, there's something that's very appealing about this one to me.
It's a cool game. I've played it. I play tested it.
Mm.
I think technically, yeah.
Yes.
So that's a
Yes.
fun one.
So like you print you are also kind of like Littlepunk in that you are publishing like a lot of these things on like small print runs yourself, right?
Yes. Yep.
Um, how do you feel like that? How do you feel like that journey's been going for you with these sort of like games that are like because like you design for yourself, so you kind of have like these designs that are like I feel like they're very different from like a lot of our games. Like maybe I don't play enough TTRPGs because I feel like a lot of these bleed into that space, but they feel very unique to me. How do you feel like that journey's been going for you?
Um, Personally, I think it's going great. It's definitely more than I ever kind of thought it could have been at the time when I was starting to do it. And um, you know, the I think Death Cab Saute was the first one that had printed and decided like, oh, maybe I can print some of these things and maybe sell them.
Mhm.
And the TTRPG space is, I mean, one, it's much it's much more feasible to print, like 100 copies of something, just in terms of like financially, I guess, and printing options because you're just printing a little booklet most of the time. And there's also so many avenues that allow for self-publishing TTRPG games and designers to get out there. Indie Press Revolution is something that, as far as I'm aware, doesn't exist in board games, where they
Yeah.
essentially will take your games and then they have like a huge network of stores that um, buy direct wholesale from Indie Press Revolution. So they're sort of a distributor, but they also have con presence where people can buy the games and they'll have like 150 indie games at the con, um, at their booth, and kind of like um, the PAX U market, and some of these other like the Lunar Punk market and stuff like that. I feel like those are um, great ways for indie board games to come out, but um, yeah, I think it's just uh, the nature of TTRPGs as like small booklets, maybe just being like uh, I don't know, cheaper to produce, and get out there.
There was a this you were at this. There was something called the Richmond Richmond Zine Fest. Is that exactly what it's called?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
touring that was really eye opening for me because first of all, um, obviously, well, I will say this: not everything there is like an RPG, but there were a lot of like kind of games there or like RPG games, and I think there was a lot of stuff there that also blurred the line. In my opinion, I don't
Yes.
think anyone there was literally thinking of it that way. I often forget and have to remind myself that there's like entire like ecosystems of creators that aren't part of these like traditional tropes of journeys, right? And they're just doing weird stuff because they want to do weird stuff, or they're doing things because they didn't have like I don't want to call it. They didn't have a relationship with someone who wasn't a mentor, but kind of in a mentor like role. They just started winging it, and they just kind of cobbled some stuff. I think I got one game there that was like there was it was a cookbook, and it was a game, and you were like you were trying to like keep data of like real recipes you were making and stuff like that. And it just I have never encountered that anywhere else. They don't have an online presence. I can't find them anywhere. They just made this thing, and I think
Yeah.
they had like 15 copies at this place. So like, that was sort of mind blowing to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those Zine Fest events, they're so inspirational just for, so many reasons. And just from like art and the kind of things that people are writing about, but even just from games, like you said, there's people that were kind of blurring the lines. Um, the ones that I did see are usually kind of in that RPG space, but I remember a handful of games. One was just like this really beautifully printed booklet. Um, it looked almost just like an art pamphlet, and
Mm.
it was just like a little, like kind of simple analog game. No RPG elements, just like, I think you bring your own little tokens. And then one I really remember that was like, I still want to make something like this because it really blew my mind was they used like a perforator and had the booklet. Just like, they made a little zine booklet and they did the little like a little rolling perforator to make it so you could like tear out game pieces from the booklet and use those game
Whoa.
pieces onto a little board that you spread out the booklet. And yeah, it was just, a designer and they were like, "Oh, I made this little game," and I was like, Give me this! This looks so cool." Yeah, incredibly inspirational. Like definitely in like kind of overlapping with the things that I want to make, but yeah, it's so cool seeing that kind of stuff in you know not like in spaces that aren't dedicated exclusively to games. Um, yeah,
Early.
and a lot of the sorry,
No,
go ahead.
no, no, I love it. I don't mean to interrupt. I was going to say that, earlier you were talking about constraints, and one thing what you just said made me realize was that a lot of these indie markets, I think what makes the game so beautiful and evocative and interesting, and a lot of these small print runs work where these games blur the lines, is because they're working in constraints. So when you do like major print runs of like 20 million copies or 1,500 copies or whatever, and you're working with like factories, that kind of nonsense in board game world, you kind of can do whatever you want. You can kind of do anything, and this leads to a really, in my mind, it leads to a lot of traditional approaches to happening weirdly, despite the fact that they can do anything. But once you start when you're in a situation where you have a limited budget, you have a limited audience, you have limited materials to work with, suddenly you have to go, how do I make this exist? And how do I make it something I'm really interested in while I'm limited with form factor, or I'm limited in finance, or I'm limited in time or space, etc. And I think that's what yields a lot of this. Like seeing somebody have like a bag of stickers and that's the game, and they're like little stickers they printed out at home and cut out, right? I don't think you'd see that to that extent in a wide stream market. I think you would see that in an indie space because of that constraint, weirdly. So I don't know. That was kind of an epiphany that I just hit while you were talking, and just feeling your excitement about it just kind of got me there. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point where when you have bigger budget and more resources, that you're less limited on um, components and things to put in the game. But I do think in some cases it want like the bigger the budget and you know risk that they're taking on, it means you want to be more safe with the content.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's like really, I think, exciting in zines and kind of smaller indie board games and zine games, is that, you know, I feel like people are more, um, you know, pushing things, excited, like doing riskier things, or just like not even like maybe intentionally risky, but just talking or having the content be about what they want it to be,
Yeah.
and not having to worry about, oh, if I don't sell 5,000 copies, then you know. Um,
I'm
but yeah, and
financially
I think
ruined.
there's probably there's probably an expectation of those kind of things being a little bit more, you know, artier or whatever. But I think it's still, you more exciting in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, working with like mostly paper material definitely makes it more feasible to do these kind of like smaller projects for sure. I really like the idea of like perforating like book lid or something so you could tear out the components. That kind of stuff reminds me of Gene Koo
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
He's always like a wizard with this papercraft stuff.
Also, Zoe, I saw you scratching your chin. We got
Awesome.
enough games going on right now. We're good. No, no, no. I saw you thinking. I saw you
I was
thinking
like,
like,
we should do zine games.
yeah, no, no, we're
I
good.
could use my cry cut to perforate.
Yes, 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 yes.
No.
So I feel like a lot of your games would I would describe a lot of your games as victorless. But some of these like smaller like solo games like Directionless and Polyhedral Garden. Um, but I think other people might just describe them as TTRPGs. Where where do you think the boundary lies between like these two things? Because I think a lot of the victorless stuff that I work on, people kind of go like, "Oh, this guy kind of has a RPG kind of feel to it." Um, have you had like, yeah, where your thoughts lie on this?
I don't know. Like, truthfully, I think I don't the way I view some of the games, like I have intentionally approached some things with like kind of the victorless thing in mind, and with the TTRPG thing in mind, but I don't always know if what the end product is falling into that, like, maybe commonly accepted definition of either of those things. Like Polyhedral Garden um, isn't really an RPG. Some people might kind of think it is, yeah, but I think it kind of falls into that category of what some people would maybe like, oh, not really a game kind of thing, which I think a lot of victorless things people, you know,
Oh yeah, they
incorrectly
do.
view that way. Um, so this probably means it's, in that victorless territory. Um, but directionless also was one that I think I had initially started with some intentions to have it victorless, and it didn't. I don't think it really ended up that way. It probably fit more into like a solo RPG space. But yeah, I also don't. I think almost every game I've made, I kind of waffle on like, I don't know if I should call this an RPG. I don't know if people will think it's that.
Hmm. They're very.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're you're a guy who does not care about labels.
so
But
cool.
you have to label it, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have to
Yeah.
call it something. And like, I don't want to just have it on the booklet, just say like a game, because that's probably more confusing.
So I guess in my mind as a player who's played a lot of these games, I think I still think I would, if I had to, like, you said, Matthew, what is this? I would probably
Right.
still say a TTRPG, and I think I'd probably still say that
Yes.
because even in like Polyhedral Garden on some level, I am I'm and this is also where I'm going to get a little cheeky and say I think a lot of games are more RPGs than we want to admit. It is an experience that I am kind of playing pretend a little bit, right? And that is
Right.
very much threaded through that game, and to me at least. And when I think of directionless, I know you mentioned that you consider that leaning a little more in the TTRPG space. I think I could see that. To me as a player, actually, that I felt a little bit different. I felt like that felt like more like a game to me, and I think part of that was the choice space of the accordion booklet, and that has like lived in my head rent free since I played that, which just had these like diminishing choices kind of as you went along, which felt fascinating to me because in a lot of traditional board games, your choices kind of open up as you go weirdly in some ways, right? Like you get more powerful, your engine gets bigger or whatever. But it was very inverted that way in to a certain point until you opened it back up, right? I will also, I just wanted to say, and I don't know if I've ever told this to you, but that game has like lived in my head in general. Since I played it with you in person, I played it a couple other times, but like I always will randomly be thinking, I'll be up late at night and I'll just think, what's that bird up to right now?
Yeah.
Like what's that bird
Oh
doing right
yeah.
now, right? And like what's it getting into? Because it just leaves, like it's just gone. And so like that was such strange evocative thing for me. So yeah, to me that was like really inspiring in this sort of victorless framework of like kind of like it a snapshot of time, like a vignette of a moment kind of thing. And that was really, really cool to me. Because I guess a lot of RPGs also to me, it feels like they kind of, I don't want to say they go infinitely, but they a lot of the traditional RPGs I've played, the story can go on forever if you want it to, but that it has to have an ending. And for me, that as a result of that, it felt more like yeah. So yeah, this interesting stuff.
I
Yeah,
also
and
really like. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Uh, I was just gonna say I really like how when you're like folding the spread smaller, smaller, and then when you I forget, is it a light? And you fold it open again, it's kind of like the motions of a bird's wings, kind of like
Yeah.
spreading and then.
Yeah, that
I'm
was
sorry,
the
continue.
I was just I mean that's kind of what I was going to talk about a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah,
that game
Zoe.
I was for a jam. I made that game for a jam, and that was the spreading the thing, the zine back apart. That was the beginning of the game. That was the starting point I had was like I want to play with an accordion zine because it was I had just been in that headspace of like looking at all the zines I had been getting, and I'm like, oh, I want to do one like how do they make that? I want to do one like that. And then thinking about what can you know, what could you take advantage of with that format? And I was like, I want to have something where during the game you're like you have that physical motion of opening up the accordion, and the jam that I did it for was specifically bird themed. I think it was called "Say Hi to a Bird." And that was like what the jam was about. And yeah, everything about that game was kind of centered around that idea and building off of that. Um, and kind of when I was making that game, kind of what you were saying, Matthew, if like it lives in a very specific time, is I feel like I borderline designed that in a like weird fever dream state because
Nice.
um, I was I was like just kind of like still really sick I had been sick for a while and kind of getting over it, but kind of still sick. And I was working on that game at the same time and kind of did a lot of stuff in like a very short period of time. And so that particular period of time is of making that game. I have really specific moments and memories of uh, and so when I think about what that game is and what I intended for it from the theme and the design, it's like very anchored in that like strange kind of period.
we didn't have this in the written questions, so I want to throw a curveball at
No,
you.
no, no.
Yeah, I know. I know. So I am always curious about this because when I listen in on these things, I always am thinking, well, how can I take some of those lessons and some of those things, and how can I put my own spin on it as a designer? What do you think are some things that both like board game designers and RPG designers can kind of take from some of these games that you've created, like some of these lessons that you've learned, kind of stuff?
Oh, I don't know. I think one of the things Zoe was mentioning earlier was seeing something on Blue Sky about, you know, uh, TTRPG designers and board game designers having opinions on one side or the other. But I've also seen um, like a handful of TTRPG designers and board game designers that I kind of like admire, um, seen a little bit of a journey of them discovering the other side
Hmm.
and being like, oh wow, look at all this cool stuff out there. This is so amazing. And there's like uh I just want to see more of that, like exploring, you know, there's tons of types of games to explore beyond just TTRPGs and board games. Um, but I do think there's, from the, I guess, most popular games of any of either of the groups, there's a lot more out there than what it may seem like. There's a lot more variety and kind of breadth to the types of games. And even for myself, it's like I want to experience other types of games. Like I've never done a LARP,
Hmm.
but a lot of people in the TTRPG space are done LARPs or design LARPs, or in addition to the types of games they design. And I'm like, there's probably a whole bunch of design space that I'm not experiencing or learning from by never having done a LARP.
Um, there's a whole I think there's a term I really like called biomimicry, which is basically like you're taking things from nature and you're trying to mimic them in form function. And so a lot of like engineers will use this to make things, but I also think this is something like
Hmm.
really high value in game design world, like observing things in nature and then recreating it. Now, the example I'm about to give has nothing to do with nature, but I just wanted to bring that up. There was a designer who was running a playtest of his game. This was years ago, and I wish I remember the designer's name. I wish I remember the name of the game, and I apologize. But essentially, it was like an Olympic, like I think it's called snowbogging or something like that, where you're in like a team sled basically, and you're constantly pivoting as a team. And so the designer put everyone in a column of chairs basically and lined them up in seats. Does that sound familiar to you? I
Oh
feel like that
yeah,
was a
yeah,
local thing. Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
think they did it at Break My Game.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it was like and there were like cards on the ground. You had to like pick up the cards and move them and stuff like that. It was a very
Yes.
physical experience, right? And right now because a lot of stuff's played tested virtually, something like that's harder to obviously get to the table. But like that was like a mimicry of this real life thing, of this real life function, and it was really fun to see. It was really fun to participate in, and it kind of shocked me. And it was like I think that was when I was kind of finding my roots in game design world. I was like, whoa, games can do some ridiculous stuff. Like, and I kind of passed it off as a party game at the time. I didn't really think much more of it, but I've thought about that. I've come back to that a lot over the years and been like, this was a thing that existed. And it just is like literally just here's this real life thing. Now let me try to give this some form function. And to me, it was very much to me, it was a LARP almost. It was like a live action role play, but with cards. I don't know if that's
Right.
100% accurate, but yeah.
But I agree, and I think party games get like a weird rap sometimes, where so many of them have a lot of crossover with role playing, like LARP type things.
Hmm.
Not exactly LARPs, not exactly role playing either, but a little bit. Definitely, a lot of them have heavy improv elements, which is extremely overlapping with just role playing. But sometimes they get kind of lumped into like you know, well, you can get this at Target or whatever. Um, and it's not a real like hobby game or whatever kind of gatekeepy thing somebody might say. Um, but well, why? There's a lot of interesting party games that do stuff out there, and I don't know. I agree with you, Matt.
Great, sweet.
I have a local group that I play board games with, and every once in a while we'll like start things off with like a party game, and they'll be like, "Okay, which these games should we play before we get to the real games?" And my heart always dies a
Right.
little. It's like I just want to play the fake party games. I don't want to play Power Grid. I don't want to play.
I don't want to play Power Grid either.
Yeah, that's not a real game.
Whoa,
I'm
whoa,
sorry.
whoa, whoa,
I'm
whoa,
joking.
whoa, whoa,
I'm
whoa.
joking.
Have a game night, but like tonight, all right, everyone, welcome to game night. Tonight we're only going to play not real games, and it's just like banger after
Yes.
banger. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, so Directionless is like one of my favorites, and that was made for like you were mentioning earlier, the Say Hi to a Bird game jam. That was like born from like the lyrical ludology group, right? Like Logan's like
Yes.
Discord.
Yes.
And like so I really like I need to get back into that Discord because like lyric games is
Me too.
like an incredibly experimental space. So I think like one of the memes though is like asking everybody what is a lyrical game to you. So I want to ask you now what a lyrical game is to you as someone who hates labels.
Yeah, no, I I don't I don't know. I think at some point in time I've probably understood or tried to understand at least what the you know commonly accepted definition of a lyric game is, but I don't really know what it is. To me, it's like when I think of very traditional RPGs or kind of um, RPGs that you would like go to, like like a D&D or a Pathfinder or something like that. The lyric games are kind of like, okay, now go to the other end of the spectrum. Um,
Yeah.
get away from numbers, get away from, like directions on how to play this, get away from maybe even being able to play this. Um, I think a lot of the lyric games that I've seen and loved are things that you look at, you like digest, you read it, and then you sit and you wonder, like, kind of just like with any like really affecting piece of art of like, I don't know about this. Like, I don't know what to think or how to feel.
Mm.
Um, and I don't always immediately get it or something like that. But those are the ones also that really like with me for a while and kind of have me thinking. Um, and that's what I think of a lot of lyric games is they're they are games, but it's not always explicit on like how do you sit down and play it by yourself or with others. Um, and yeah, they tend to um, kind of thrive in like an experimental space.
Correct me if I'm wrong, or if this sounds like the wrong analogy, but I always kind of paralleled them to poetry and literature. Yeah,
Yeah,
so like we look at like traditional novels versus like poetry, postmodern poetry, that kind of thing. Would that be
yeah,
fair?
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. I think so. I mean, I'm certainly no expert in poetry nor in lyric games, and the way I understand it, at least, is when lyric games kind of popped off. It was before I was really into indie TTRPGs. So I think the boom of them had come in after that, and so I've been looking back on them kind of retrospectively, and seeing some of the newer things that are still coming out. But whatever the discussion was at that time wasn't something I experienced.
Hmm.
But yeah, definitely, I think. Um, I think that's a good analogy. And I mean, some layered games that I've seen are just almost literally just poetry
Hmm.
that exist or, attempt to exist in like a game space. And I think a lot of them work really well.
Nice.
The game of yours that gives me the most layered game vibes is probably Ominous Blessing. Uh, that one's really cool. It's like a collection of 12-word games. And then I really like the Goatman one, where you're just meant to instinctually connect like these different words that you have listed. And when I was playing, I was like the goat man's watching me and pursuing me, but wait, the goat man wants death. I'm going to pursue the goat man. Like
Yeah, and I'll be a broken record, but I made that for a jam. Specifically, the jam was making 12-word games. And yeah, I think almost like um, by default, a 12-word game probably has to be a layered game of some sort.
yeah,
There's,
yeah.
it's you can't really fit any kind of context or background into that. So it has to be a little bit like, up to interpretation or, you know, kind of in that um, poetry type space. But yeah, I mean, it's such a cool constraint. And I've seen a bunch of them and still like it's like how many, I don't remember how many games were submitted to that jam, but more than you would think for like such a constrained kind of thing.
Yeah, the lesson I'm
Yeah.
taking from a lot of this conversation tonight is to seek limitation and to like be active in seeking limitations for some creative pursuits because it sounds to me like at the very least like a lot of these are I've heard a lot of traditional advice about like do a lot of different things, absolutely be inspired by a lot of different things, very true, but like I think I don't often hear the advice of actively pursue constraints, actively pursue limitations on what you're creating, which seems to be very high value for exploring things in really experimental ways, because you suddenly have to do that. You have to come up with solutions in your brain for things. Is that reasonable to say, you think, or am I kind of off the mark here?
No, absolutely. And it's also kind of in that zine space as well, where if sometimes I'll set out to write something and okay, I want this to exist on, a one page folded zine,
Hmm.
or I want it to exist on a quarter page zine. And, I could write a bunch for like a quarter page zine and it could be really, really long, but I will be constrained at some point by the amount of paper I can fold together and staple.
Right.
I probably can't do, 12 sheets thick and staple that. Um, so if I kind of like set not like necessarily a very hard limit, but kind of a softer limit, it really you start and when you start approaching that when you're like writing an outline or the limits of a game, that's when you start saying, okay, I can't include this anymore, cut it, cut this, and now you have something um, more distilled or something you kind of maybe think more intentionally about what do you want to focus on with this thing.
Hmm.
And if I can't fit more, then and I want to focus on this thing, okay, now what within that thing do I want to keep in this little project? And I don't always think that those constraints are necessary, but I like kind of playing in that space. It also makes it so I finish projects.
Yeah.
Breaking boundaries. More like seeking boundaries, am I
Yeah, we
right?
have the wrong title. Well, you got to know when to break them, right? You got to know when to. I feel like also there's a sort of a lesson of like, I think like Chris was talking about like, I want to do certain things, but sometimes I also want to. Once I have this established, now I know what framework I have that I'm willing and what framework I am and am not willing to break. So you can kind of make those calls. Maybe breaking boundaries sometimes, occasionally.
Yeah,
That's a
you
catchy
gotta.
one.
It's like you have to be like you have to be like an expert in something before you know how to like break the rules like appropriately. I forget where
Hmm.
that what that name is.
Something like this. An artist friend of mine
Yeah.
once got this advice from someone who was like a professional, like that's their day job, illustrator. Like you have to master human physiology, or it helps to master human physiology to find your own style. Because once you master the boring nonsense, then you start breaking all the rules and start doing the cool nonsense. But you knew all the boring nonsense first. So now you'd be like, all right, I know how this is supposed to go, but instead of a rib cage, it's going to be a horse now, and I'm going to get away with it easily because I know how to do that. I don't think that's always true, but I do think that's some interesting wisdom, right, to apply to things. I feel like in game design world it may be harder because like if you're a lot of our conversations on here have been folks that have had to unpack years of traditional insight and quote unquote expert advice. And I think we're all still doing
Right.
that to an extent. Like, I think if we were in this conversation with somebody who's, I don't know, been making traditional games for years, they'd be like, a lyric game? Poetry? What are you talking about? Huh? So I think there's still a lot to be done in that sense.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes of, the types of games that I played, growing up or when I first started getting into hobby games. Um, you know, I wonder if I had encountered like some of the Lunar Punk games then, like what I would have thought about them, would I
Mm-hmm.
have been kind of locked into what I had experienced already and be like, oh, what is that? Or would it have just been like an early, mind-blowing thing? Um, I find the games that y'all make mind-blowing now, and so would it have been just like a earlier push, or would I have been too, my horizon's not broad enough at the time? I don't know.
We're gonna time travel and find
I,
out. Zoe, let's get the Lunar Punk time machine out.
you promised we wouldn't use it anymore.
Nope, it's happening.
Not again.
One last ride.
I don't I don't have a good reason to segue into this. I just wanted to say that Unlock Bones is such a cool thing that you made that I don't see anybody else do. Or like the lock screen of your phone is like the almost like the TTRPG prompts. I don't know. I just wanted to say that was really cool.
Thank you. I thought that was a fun thing. And I remember a few people, I think I might be wrong, but I think that was like the first time that somebody had made a game that was like based on something I had made. And that was like I couldn't believe it. Like it was so um kind of amazing to see. And I don't know, that game is like such a kind of a non game, and it was just like really just a lock, what's going on with the lock screen there? Like, is that something? And yeah, I wish you know I'd like to come back to it at some point and see if there's more to do with it, or like more to explore there. But yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. I one of these days I gotta make my own lock screen game. So something I can play with whenever I'm unlocking my phone. So just to like further like kneecap myself like with my ADHD-ness, like I go to use my phone to like take an important note. I'm like, oh, looks like I just got 3 health.
Right, yeah.
I feel like this would just be a journey of me accidentally locking myself out of my phone by playing the game. I'd have to like really tune it to be very accurate to whatever the game is. I don't know how exactly it works, but yeah.
Well,
Y'all questioned out?
is there? Yeah, I'm all
We did
questioned
it.
out. I I also, I guess that just as gush some more, I also think Wither and Grow is like such a cool like journaling game. Like
Thank
where
you.
you have to roll four dice and then you choose which attribute that's like tied to which number goes up and which attribute tied to which number goes down. And the way that you like the board gaming element is that you could like kind of like grow out control, or you could like, or aspects of yourself could die, and this could further put yourself at risk of like withering away. I just think it's like a really cool, like very concise, really cool mechanic. I don't know. I thought that was really awesome.
Thank you. I Wither and Grow is one that I am particularly attached to, um, as just a thing. I also I'm pretty proud of that design. Even I do think it's very simple, um, but I think that was also when I started to like um, kind of mess around a little bit more with like like tiny zine game thing,
Mm.
and like I had intentionally done a lot of things with like, oh, okay, what you know how can I make this so somebody can print it themselves, and what kind of like, well, I have this very particular paper that I want to print it on, and kind of having the things like made for that. And I don't often draw things. I'm kind of self-conscious about my own drawing and art and stuff like that, and but I felt that was one of the games that I felt like good about the stuff that I had drawn. So I really, every time I look at that game, I you know I am proud of it.
Nice.
Well, yeah, the rest of this dialogue it does is just going to be me gushing over
Yeah,
Chris's
all right. It's
games.
time to let's put this to the bed here.
No,
Chris,
no, no,
it's,
no,
no,
wait,
no,
wait,
no.
wait.
All right, all right. I'm going to put this to bed here. Chris, you can get complimented on your own time. So let's. This has been great. Thank you for joining us on Dialogue at Dust. It's been a great time having you on, and certainly, I've taken some great lessons from this conversation tonight. Where can we find you on the internet? Where can we find your cool games? Where are you heading next? What's going on? What's up with you?
Um, okay, you can find me on the Blue Sky Junk Food Games there. You can find my games junkfoodgames.itch.io. Um, I'm gonna be next. I'm going to a little local holiday tabletop market in a couple days.
Ah,
Um, and then gonna go to Magfest, and yeah,
yeah.
some other events and stuff that will be coming up in the future. But uh, I got a game cooking that I'm very excited about. It's in the oven, and we'll be talking about it at some point more in the future. But it might be the biggest one yet. I don't know yet.
Whoa. Nice. Exciting stuff. Well, thank you so much for being on. We'll see you all next time at the next dusk. Have a good one.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
See ya.